Welcome again. I'm so glad that you're here, that you're sharing Mother's Day with us today. That video is really it's about me because my mom is the best, and I am so glad that we get to share this season of life all together as a family, and we've been having a good time. We have more good times together. Today, I hope you all have great plans for your mom. If your mom's not here, you can call her and just say, hey, love you. I'm so thankful for you. Listen, before we continue on with the service, just a couple things. One, I want to welcome you if you're here for the first time or the second time. There's a card in the seat back in front of you, and if everyone could just kind of take that and pull that out and look at that. If you're here for the first time or the second time, would you just fill that out, your name, your email, mark that it's your first time or second time, and really important on there is the question, how did you hear about us? And that helps us know how we're reaching our community, because as a church, we're not looking to simply kind of exist and pull off Sunday morning after Sunday morning. We really want to help everybody on their spiritual journey. We believe that every person is on a spiritual journey, going from not knowing God into a place where we know God. And we believe as a church that you know God as you begin to know Jesus. And that when you begin to know Jesus, He wants to help you to find freedom. Freedom from the things that hold you back in life, freedom from yesterday, freedom from the things that would keep you from discovering your purpose here on this earth. And we believe that every person has a purpose. And when we find that and we begin to live that out, we begin to make a difference in the lives of other people. And that's at the heart of what it means to be human, as God has created us to be people who are making a difference. And so we want to help everyone on that journey. We want to help you along that journey. And so knowing how you found out about us helps us know how we're reaching our community. So if you would fill that out and you can bring that to the Connect Center at the end of the service, that helps us out a ton. Listen, here's my promise to you, our no hassle guarantee. No one's going to show up at your house or give you a call or anything strange like that. Your name's not going to go on a mailing list. We just want to send you a card, an email to say thank you for spending the morning with us, let you know how you can connect further with Capital Church. And so we welcome you to do that and appreciate that. On the flip side, you'll see it says further. And this is for everyone here. There may be you may be at a point where you're saying, you know what, I'm ready to take a step further in my spiritual walk, in my journey with Jesus. And so there's a number of ways that you can do that. You can connect further with His church and take another step. And at the very bottom is a place for prayer requests, and you can see that. All that can come to the Connect Center at the end of service, and we'll talk again about that. Does that sound good? And now, I want to welcome to come and to deliver the word for us, my father, Pastor Dave. He's here, and there he is right there, and he's going to share us. Can we welcome Pastor Dave?
Well, it's good to be here again today and to share with you another Mother's Day message. I think I did it last year and this year. Now we're 2 years in a row, and it's good. You know a little bit more about me. I know a little bit more about you, so that makes it a little easier, I think, as we share the word. As today is Mother's Day, I'm well aware of this kind of day. It's not easy for some people. Some of you have there's all kind of different situations in a congregation regarding mothers. Some are here, some have gone on to be with the Lord. So the day can be kind of a mixed bag of emotions for some of us. I'm also aware of the fact that everybody sitting here is not a mother, and so we're sensitive to that as well. The one thing, though, I can be sure of 100% is that we were all children at one point. Am I right on that? I think so. If there's one common characteristic of children, of course, is that children like to be seen. They like to be seen. I know there was an old adage at one point, right? Children should be seen and not heard. But they like to be seen and heard, I think. But mostly they like to be seen. And we know that because many times we'll hear children say, Mommy, look at this. Or, Daddy, look at this. And they're doing something, maybe something goofy, rolling over, standing on their head, whatever. And look at me. And they want to be seen by their mothers and their fathers. Now, I know many of you also have been a mother who wonders sometimes if she's ever seen. We know children like to be seen, but sometimes mothers would like to be seen as well. Because I can think there comes a point as a mom where you begin to think that you might even be invisible. I saw an excerpt from a writer named Nicole Johnson, and she wrote an article entitled that, I Am Invisible. And I want to read just a little short paragraph from her writing. She said, "It all began to make sense, the blank stares, the lack of response, the way one of the kids will walk into the room while I'm on the phone and ask to be taken to the store. And inside I'm thinking, can't you see I'm on the phone? Obviously not. No one can see if I'm on the phone or cooking or sweeping the floor or even standing on my head in the corner because no one can see me at all. I'm invisible." She was having this kind of emotional response here to what was going on in her heart. She said, "Some days I'm only a pair of hands, nothing more. Can you fix this? Can you tie this? Can you open this? Some days I'm not a pair of hands. I'm not even a human being. I am a clock to ask what time is it. I'm a satellite guide to answer what number is the Disney Channel on. I'm a car to order, right around 5:30, please, Mom, can you take me to the mall?" I was certain that these were the hands that once held books and the eyes that studied history and the mind that graduated. But now they've all disappeared into the peanut butter, never to be seen again. Yes, she's going, she's gone. I'm invisible. She was just expressing how she felt about sometimes the circumstances of motherhood. Well, I don't know if that's how you feel like this morning, but we're going to look in the Bible at a mother and a child to explore a truth that is relevant for all of us this morning, whether we're a mother or not, even though I'm directing this message primarily on this Mother's Day to moms. Yet this really applies to every one of us, as you'll see as we go on. It's found in Genesis. The story is found in the first book of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 16. And I want to take the whole chapter, but we'll read just the first 6 verses to get just a little bit of the background. It's about Sarah and Hagar. It reads, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife," this is before their names were changed, "Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, and she had an Egyptian maid whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abram, 'Now behold, the Lord has prevented me from bearing children. Please go into my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children through her.' And Abram listened to the voice of Sarai." Now, I don't have time to go back into all the cultural thing there. It's completely out of it's not in our focus as far as our culture is concerned, thank God. But that was part of their culture, so you understand that as I go on. "And after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, Abram's wife Sarai took Hagar the Egyptian, her maid, and gave her to her husband Abram as his wife. And he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her sight. And Sarai said to Abram, 'May the wrong done me be upon you. I gave my maid into your arms, but when she saw that she had conceived, I was despised in her sight. May the Lord judge between you and me.' But Abram said to Sarai, 'Behold, your maid is in your power.'" That's the old handoff. "Behold, your maid is in your power. Do to her what is good in your sight." So Sarai treated Hagar harshly, and Hagar fled from her presence. So in this story, we meet Hagar, this immigrant from Egypt. She has, at this point, no sense of belonging. She's just simply a tool here. She's running away now. She's running away from a household where she was considered no more than a body and something to produce offspring for this infertile couple that had her as a slave. Like many daughters of Hagar, this Hagar is mistreated. She's trapped in a system where she literally feels invisible. She has no rights. She has no dignity. She's no freedom of choice. And quite frankly, at this point, she has had enough. And it's very hard to be a nobody with no name. In fact, she's referred to here by Abraham and Sarai simply as the maid or as the Egyptian. Sarai and Abram probably didn't really see Hagar even as a person. She was there to simply serve a purpose. And they probably didn't even notice that she ran away and that she left home. It would seem to me that Hagar doesn't know what she wants, but she knows what she doesn't want. And she doesn't want to be treated harshly. She doesn't want to be treated as a non-person. She doesn't want to be treated as an invisible person. But she doesn't realize what her greatest need is, actually, until she runs from home and she meets the God who meets her in this place where she has run to, this wilderness place, this desert place. And out of her need, she calls this God El Roi, which in the Hebrew is El Roi, but in the English it is the God who sees, the God who sees. So she names God, and I often wonder when I read that passage, what would I name God? What would you name God if you had the chance to name him? Perhaps you might name him the God who loves, because that was your greatest need, and out of your need came your expression of his name. The God who comforts, the God who guides, the God who forgives, maybe the God of a second chance. Or maybe your experience was a little more harsh and you had another name for him. Whatever you would choose as your name for God would actually tell a whole lot about you, would tell a whole lot about me, would tell a whole lot about your particular need than it would about the character of God, because it is through our need that we experience God in our deepest need, in our deepest way. Whatever is our deepest need is how we, in essence, begin to understand God. Hagar here probably felt very insignificant. She felt very misunderstood. But the reality was, in God's sight, she was a very significant person. Ironically, Hagar has the longest conversation of any woman and almost of any man that is recorded in the Old Testament scripture. Hagar, this Egyptian maid, is the only person actually in the Bible up to this point who gives God a name. Prior to this, God has given himself a name. He has chosen to be introduced as to the children of Israel as Elohim, the great creator. He introduced himself as Yahweh, the covenant maker. He introduced himself as El Shaddai, the great and almighty one. And so he gave himself these names to the people of Israel. And they were great names, majestic names. But Hagar needed something beyond just a great name that was a God who may have been at a distance. She may have heard of this God, but she didn't know this God. No, she needed something a little bit more intimate, a little bit more personal. And she meets this God in her need, in this lonely place in the wilderness. And she declares, El Roi, the God who sees me. And I want to spend these next few moments just looking at the importance of this name, the importance of this statement, and what difference it makes to our lives, what difference it makes to my life, your life, that there is a God that we can name El Roi, a God who sees us. What difference does it make to a mother that to know that in her place and perhaps out of her need, she can experience a God who sees her? For that matter of fact, any of us. And that's why I say that even though I'm speaking to mothers, it really applies to all of us. To a father, to a brother, to a sister, to a child, to a young person. To know that there is a God who sees us. We have a very practical truth here as a foundation. Because the fundamental need of probably every person is to be seen. That's why we say so many times, or that's why we say as children, watch me, mommy. Watch me, daddy. And the truth is, we don't want just anyone to watch us. We want our mother to watch us. We want our father to watch us. I don't want my friend's mother, watching me play soccer. I want my mother watching me play soccer. I want my mother to come and to see me. I remember a mother in one of my previous churches who was working in a preschool situation, and she had this experience, and she said, "This experience, Pastor, really changed my life." She said, as she was working as an aide in the school, her child Matthew was attending this school, and she was sitting next to Matthew's friend, whose name was Joshua. Joshua was moving about, and he was a very active boy, and they were probably getting prepared for Mother's Day, I don't know, but they were making little things, and she noticed that Joshua was just very focused. He was just very still, and he was building a rocket out of toilet rolls and some other miscellaneous material. Well, to him, he had built this very magnificent rocket, and he was proud of it. And he had just finished it when it came time. It was the end of the day, and the parents were coming to pick up their children, and his mother was a little bit late, and so he was kind of left there alone. And finally, his mother came in, and she just came rushing in, and she looked flustered, and her face was red, and she was obviously either late to get somewhere. And Joshua, but he was just so excited to see her. But she just started rushing up to him and gathering up his things and getting his jacket and all the rest of the stuff. But he just stood there, just straight and tall, and he was excited. He wanted her to see this magnificent rocket that he had built just for her. And he said it several times, "Mommy, look at my rocket. Mommy, look at my rocket." But this mother just never gave him a first glance or even a second glance. And she basically said to him, "Come on, Joshua, hurry up." She says, "I'm in a hurry." And she started heading out the door. "Stop dawdling, Joshua. I'm in a hurry." And he's trailing along her, and behind him is this little rocket that he had built. And that's this mother who was talking to me about the situation she said, "Pastor, as I watched him leave, I just saw his shoulders slump, and I saw his rocket go down by his side, and he was just trailing. It was just trailing it along now. It was hanging limply there, and it no longer had any magnificence that it had before. It just kind of actually looked pretty worthless." Is probably what little Joshua felt at this time too, pretty worthless. Because all Joshua wanted was his mother to look at that rocket. And she went on to say, she said, "It was a wake-up call for me, Pastor." She says, I wanted to yell at that very rushed, flustered mother and say, "Do you know how long it has taken for him to build this rocket? Do you know how, he's never been so focused in all of his life? Do you know he actually built this rocket for you? And how hard would it be for you to just take a moment, just a simple moment, and say, 'Joshua, that's fantastic.'" She said, but she didn't, and she said, "I tell you, it changed my life forever as I focused more on what my children were doing." Well, we all need that. We all need that. Everybody needs that. We want to be seen. We do things oftentimes to be seen. Why do we long for God who sees us? And what difference does that make? And I can tell you this morning, folks, that it makes all the difference in the world, because to be seen is to be significant. To be seen means it casts value to our lives. To be seen gives us a reason. It gives us a purpose for being here, for being on planet Earth, for having this particular time of life. These periods, these years of life that we've been given here on earth. God says, and Pastor David read it in the baby dedication, Psalm 139 and verse 16. God says, "Before I formed you, I saw you. Before I formed you, I saw you. My eyes saw your unformed body." Can you imagine that? Even before we were born, God has seen us. God sees us. Before anyone else sees us, God sees us. He's way ahead of all the technology. He sees us. He foresaw us into being. And once he foresaw us and created us, then he watches over his creation. He's careful to watch over his creation. It makes all the difference as how you understand this morning and how you conceive God seeing you. How you conceive and how you understand the eyes of God. I've visited in the homes of parishioners from time to time, and I've seen plaques in people's homes. Sometimes these plaques have scripture on them. Sometimes they're just Christian sayings. I don't know if they just put them up for me when I come, but I noticed a few of them. I saw one that said, "Christ is the head of this house, the unseen guest at every meal, and the silent listener to every conversation." That's a view of God being there and seeing us. I saw one that was actually a partial quote of Jeremiah chapter 24, verse 6, that says, I shall set mine eyes upon thee. Now, some people see these words and choose to think, by way of experience, by way of background, whatever it might be, and they read these words, and they think that maybe Jesus is somehow kind of sneaking around and just waiting to hear or see them do something that, he's not going to like. And that he's got his eye on them and he's ready to catch them at any moment as soon as they do something bad. And they have this kind of view about God's eyes on them, watching them all the time. My mother, bless her heart, would always say to me, watch yourself, David. God's going to get you. God has his eyes on you. God's going to get you. And that stuck with me. Here I am preaching it all these years later. I remembered what she said. Sometimes it helps you. And if it does help you to live for God, well, so be it. All right, I'm not going to criticize that. Sometimes that came to me in certain situations that was very helpful for me to realize that God had his eyes on me and I better not be doing these things. So sometimes that's very helpful. But I think that maybe some of us need to hear a different idea about God's eyes on us and to realize the gaze of God, the eyes of God, are loving eyes. The full text of Jeremiah 24:6 says, my eyes will watch over them for their what? Good. For their good. My eyes will watch over them for their good. Now I know Jeremiah the prophet here, they were in exile, the children of Israel in exile. God is talking to the children of Israel. And they are in Israel. They probably thought at this point, many of them, that God had abandoned them, that God no longer loved them, that God didn't know them anymore, that maybe God didn't see them anymore. They had hung up their harps and they wept. But God says through Jeremiah the prophet, my eyes see them, I will watch over them for their good. When we pastored in New Jersey, and our kids, your pastor and our grandchildren, wife, they would visit us from Albany. We anxiously awaited their arrival. And I'm sure some of you who have children who are away and they come home for various holidays and various visits, you know what I mean. And you'll identify with this. We wait for them. We wait for their arrival. And when they arrive, there's a lot of joy and happiness, and we can't we practically unpack them before they get out of the car, and we make sure they get into the home, into their various rooms and all of that. And we enjoy whatever little time we have, we enjoy it together. But inevitably, the time comes when we have to pack the car up again. I remember my mother many times, we would pull in the driveway and she was so anxious to see us, but she would, as soon as we get out of the car, she'd say, when are you leaving? Now, she wasn't saying that because she didn't want us to stay. She just was anxious about the fact. She wanted to know how long we were going to stay. So this time comes when you have to pack up and to leave, and they would head back to Albany, and we would all kind of gather. It was kind of a ritual. We'd all gather outside, and they would get in their car, and they would begin to drive up the street. And we were waving, and we're waving, and we're waving, and they're waving out the car. I know they can't see us anymore. We just see their arms out there waving up and they would get up to the end of the street, and then they would turn right and go out the right side, and of course, then we couldn't see them anymore. And we would say, they're gone. We can't see them anymore. One particular time, I remember just feeling kind of down about all of that, and I heard God really speak in my heart and say, you can't see them, but don't worry, I see them. I see them, and I will watch over them while we're apart. That did a whole lot for me. That strengthened my heart when I heard that in my life, in my heart. But what's it like to live under the gaze of God? What's it like to live under the gaze of a loving Heavenly Father? There's another beautiful verse in Zephaniah chapter 3, verse 17 that says, he will take great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love. That just speaks to me about so many times we get so anxious and we get so fearful over so many things. Isn't it wonderful? How many of you ever experienced being quieted by the love of God? To be quieted, to be given peace by the love of God. To know that feeling is a great feeling. Where you just dared to sit and be and be gazed upon by God, and it quiets you in that moment. Psalm 33, verse 13 says, "The Lord looks down from heaven. He sees all the sons of men from his dwelling place. He looks out on all the inhabitants of the earth." He understands. He knows where we are. There's never a moment, there's never a time when he doesn't know exactly where we are. And he has an understanding, gazing look at us. To be seen, to be understood, is to be encouraged. In Jesus' great Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 6, verse 6, Jesus said, "Your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Now, I know some of you, we hear the word reward, and sometimes we think mostly in material things or some kind of situation or whatever, but I see this as the reward of his presence. I see this as the reward of his pleasure when he sees, when he looks down upon us. And to be able to relax and to be able to sit in the presence of God as he has pleasure. We know, I think that word pleasure can really be translated approval. So many of us still continue to seek for approval, don't we? I don't know how long no matter how long you live, we want the approval of our parents. We want the approval of people. It means it casts pleasure on our hearts. It gives us peace. It quiets us. There's some things that we always look for. Approval. I remember the quotation from Chariots of Fire. It was one of my favorite movies. How many remember that movie, Chariots of Fire? Where Eric Liddell, who had stood up for God in the Sabbath and his understanding of the Sabbath and wouldn't race on that day. And so they moved him to another race, and he ended up winning a gold medal for his race in the 1924 Olympics. But he made the quote one point when he was talking to his sister. He said, "I believe God made me for a purpose, but he also made me fast, and when I run, I feel his pleasure. When I run, I feel his pleasure." I don't know what you sense when you think about God seeing you. But maybe this Mother's Day, maybe this one day, if you can take away from this message anything, I pray that you can feel his pleasure. I pray that you will be able to sense his pleasure. I don't know if you thought of a God seeing you who makes you, what it makes you do. Does it make you cringe or does it give you courage? But I pray for this one day, for this one moment, for this one Mother's Day, that you walk out of here sensing the love of God on your heart. That as God looks at you, as God sees you, you feel his pleasure, you feel his love. Most of the time when we look back on our lives, I think we can pinpoint times when we realized that he was literally watching over us, even though we weren't necessarily aware of it at the time. But it comes to us maybe sometimes days later or even years later that God was watching over me. We worship a God who sees. That's what Hagar discovered when she fled into the desert. He sees me, El Rohi. He knows me. He knows my name. I'm out here with my child, but I'm not really alone because God is with me. He sees me. He sees the situation I'm in. He knows all about it. He understands. Just because you can't see God doesn't mean that he's not there. Just because you think he's not there doesn't mean he doesn't see you. Just because I can't see him doing anything immediately does not mean he's not doing something. To be seen also doesn't mean that we don't fall. The Bible doesn't say no sparrows fall. It simply says he sees the sparrow that falls. Sometimes falling is a part of life. God doesn't always stop everything that eventually hurts us. Sometimes we choose to go our own way. Sometimes we choose to have our own independence. Sometimes we choose to abuse free will. And we step outside of what's best for us. And we know it besides that. And sometimes we try to hide from God, thinking that he won't notice, thinking that he won't see us. But of course, when it comes to us, we understand, no, he does know, he does see us. There's no place I can go. The psalmist said that too. There's no place I can go without God seeing me. He doesn't always stop the hurt that we do to ourselves. He doesn't always stop the hurt that sometimes we do to others. But but he's always there. He's always watching over us. He loves every person who he has created, and no matter where we are, that means you. No matter what we've done, no matter what's going on in our life, that means you, that means me. To be seen by God is to be loved by God, because he gazes and looks on us with his love. What difference does that make in our lives? It makes all the difference, doesn't it? All the difference. Now, it won't make any difference unless we look back to him. Unless we meet his gaze. Unless we see God. Unless our hearts are turned toward him, even as his heart is turned toward us. How life-changing is it to go every day knowing I can see God who sees me? He guards me, it says, yes, as the apple of his eye. And remarkably, in Psalm 32:8, it says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you shall go. I will guide you with my eye. What does that mean, I will guide you with my eye? It means that God will guide us with his eye, but not unless we look to him. That we have to have our attention and our focus set upon him. If I, by faith, look back to him, he'll guide me. How many of you have heard at one time or another, or maybe even said it, look at me when I'm talking to you. Look at me when I'm talking to you. I want to tell you, I think God has to say that to us more than once. That he wants our full attention. That he wants our focus. And what's the reason for that? So he can guide us. So he can direct us. Help us to see things. Help us to see things as he sees them. So he encourages us. He admonishes us. Look to me. I think one of my favorite moments in all of the scripture is when Peter, who has watched Jesus being arrested, saw him taken away. All the disciples have run away now, but Peter comes back and he follows the crowd, and he goes to see Jesus, but he stays at a distance. And he thought he couldn't be seen, but he still wanted to see Jesus. He just didn't want to stand out and stand up for Jesus, but he wanted to still see Jesus. And then there comes that drastic moment when he denies Jesus 3 times. And at that moment, just as Jesus predicted, there is the cry of the rooster. And at that moment, Jesus is taken from one trial to another, and he walks past Peter. And Luke records it like this. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. That was Peter's denial. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the word that the Lord had spoken to him. Before the rooster crows today, you're going to disown me 3 times. And Peter goes out and he weeps bitterly. I want to ask you, can you imagine that look? That look, and what that look said to Peter. It says, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Maybe some of you might imagine that it said, I knew you'd fail me, Peter. You let me down, Peter. I'm finished with you, Peter. Was that the kind of look? What did Peter see in that face? My opinion is, I think it was not that kind of look. I think it was the kind of look that said, I knew you'd fail, Peter, yes, but I love you, Peter. And more than that, Peter, I still know that you love me. Nothing has changed in our relationship, Peter. Have you ever wondered, and the reason I say that is, have you ever wondered when you read that account, how do we know that Jesus looked at Peter? Luke was not there to record it. Luke wrote about it, but how does he know that Jesus looked at Peter? And the only reason I can think of is that Peter had to share that with Luke and somehow, or with Mark, or whoever he took it from. He shared the story, and when he shared the story, he had to tell them that he looked at Jesus. He turned around and looked back at Jesus, and that's how we know that Jesus looked at him. If Peter had not looked back at Jesus, he wouldn't have seen that Jesus was looking at him. And when Peter had failed, he disappointed himself. He denied Jesus. He betrayed Jesus. And momentarily at that point, he took his eyes off Jesus. But you see, the truth of the matter is Jesus never took his eyes off Peter. That's what Peter saw when he turned back and looked at Jesus. He never takes his eyes off of you and me, no matter where we are. There's that old song, "It's too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off of you." I can croon that, right? I can croon that out. How many remember that song? Well, that's what God says. That's what God says. I hope that you can take that away this morning. He can't take his eyes off of you. And it's a gaze and a view of love. He loves you. He made you. He sees you no matter where you are, no matter what's going on in your life. God has his eyes on you. Praise God. Would you stand with me? I trust this morning that you have looked back, even as Peter did. Fix your eyes on Jesus. The Bible refers to him as the author or the beginner and the finisher of our faith. Whether you like it or not, and whether you believe it or not, and whether you want it or not, God's eyes are on you. God's eyes see us today. He sees you. He gazes upon you, and he looks upon you with pleasure. He sees us today. He sees us here in this place. He sees us worshiping him. He knows where we are. And he's going to see you this morning as you drive away from this place. Now, I know this to be the truth. Some of us are going to drive away. Some of you mothers are going to drive from this place this morning, and maybe you're going to go out to brunch. You're going to be with family. You're going to have a wonderful time. You're going to a joy-filled place. You're going back to a home that's filled with peace and pleasure and joy. But I would dare say that there may be one, two, I don't know how many in this place this morning, and you're going home to a different address. You may be going home to a different situation, a different atmosphere, a different circumstance of life. Maybe there's sadness there. Maybe there's turmoil there. God forbid, maybe there's even abuse there. Can I tell you this morning that as much as he sees the person going to a place of joy, he sees you going to your place of sadness as well. He's not going to take his eyes off of you. He sees you where you live your life. He sees everything about your life. He sees you as you choose your life, as you choose your career, as you function as a mother, as you go through your married life, as you walk down an aisle to get married. God sees me. He sees you. And nobody knows and nobody understands, and nobody may know your predicament. Nobody may know your circumstance of life, but I can tell you with assurance that God knows and understands, and he sees you. And I want you to leave this place this morning being encouraged with that truth. And you can look to him. You can see him this morning. Not literally, of course. I'm not speaking like that. But you can see him. We can all see him with eyes of faith. You see him in this word as you read this word every day. And if you look for him, you'll be able to see him in the handprint of the circumstances of your life. You'll see him. You'll be able to determine. You'll be able to go back through your life and you'll say, oh, that's where God was watching over me. That's where God saw me. God saw me here. God saw me there. I know God was watching over me here. You'll be able to see him in the circumstances of your life. And most assuredly, you and I will be able to see him in the closet of prayer. As we go in that secret place with him, we will sense his presence and we will know that he sees us. We can see him in the faces sometimes of other people. We can see him in the faces of the hungry, Jesus said to us. We'll be able to see him in the faces of the thirsty and the stranger and the naked and the sick and the prisoner. And when we see God, he'll open our eyes to see as he sees. That will change our perspective on all of life and all of love and all of our experience. And when you see, you believe. And when you believe, you see. Hagar had longed to be seen, and she met the God, El Rohi, she met the God who sees in that lonely place in the desert. And I trust this morning that that you have now seen the God who sees you. And this Mother's Day and today, I want to pray with and for our mothers. So if your mother is here this morning, would you go and get her, and would you bring her up to this place, because we want to have a word of prayer if your mother is here. If the mother of your children are here, would you take her by the hand and bring her up here as well this morning? And perhaps none of your children are here. There's no one to take you by the hand, but if you're a mother, would you join us? Please join us at this place here this morning, and we're going to have a word of prayer over